Merci beaucoup pour votre invitation à Digiteo. But that's all what I will speak in French. So although I've been often in Paris, my French is more concentrating on the menus in the restaurant, which is, I think, very important too. For scientific presentations, I prefer to speak in English. So yeah, thanks a lot for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in this annual forum 2011, and especially with a connection to Khaldun, so that was very fruitful, and the discussions we had already on this topic. So what I will tell you about is smart hybrid cities and also a view on the relationship to ambient intelligence or pervasive computing or ubiquitous computing. So I have quite a lot of topics, and we'll see how we go through during the time. Unfortunately, I can give you only a short overview over this. There might be another possibility to speak more in extension about this. On the other hand, my voice today, as you hear, is a little bit deteriorating. So maybe it's not so bad that I don't have so much time to talk. I will start out with a video just to wake you up. So this goes on for too long that I could accommodate it in this presentation, but it just gives you an idea on the range of associations people have about cities in the future, digital cities, etc. On the other hand, it's sometimes very useful to look also back in the past to see what people had for visions for them at that time for the future. So especially I like this guy here on the left side, in this easy chair, floating between the skyscrapers, having a cigar and a glass of champagne. And I think this is very French here because it's from a French magazine. So, but you see also some recurring themes about the transportation ideas people had in that area. On the other hand, they also had ideas about how technology would help you to do your daily chores. For example, this is a ad from the 1920s about from the American Independent Electric Light and Power Company, sitting again in an easy chair and then controlling a robot with a microphone, mowing your lawn and cutting your hedges. But the future has arrived, but in a different way. As you probably know, there are these automatic mowing machines. They are completely autonomous. They go around, they know where they have been. They also go to a place to recharge or go from the shade into the sun in order to recharge their solar panels. But I think the whole issue has to be put into a more global framework. We have entered an urban age, and this is defined that more than half of the population, of the world population, is living in urban areas. And in 2050, this will be even 70%, with a major growth in Asia and Africa. Just imagine, Greater Tokyo has already now about 35, or nobody knows exactly, around that range, million inhabitants. And this is larger than the population of Canada. Canada is a large country, not so densely populated, but still it gives you an idea that there is a scaling issue here we are confronted with. So, of course, there are many issues about the city of the future. I will only have to concentrate on a few. So one, you could say, would be urban life management. And yeah, you can take two perspectives. One, how a person or a group is managing its life in a city. But then also the other perspective, how to manage an urban environment for these people. And there are the usual suspects like smart transportation, environment. Khaldun mentioned some of those, health monitoring, but also issues like responsible citizenship, facilitating engagement and involvement. In a study from European Smart Cities project, EU-funded project, they came up with the following 6 characteristics. They are not very surprising, but it's on the other hand nice to have them in one figure, and you see smart economy, smart government, smart. Everything has to be smart. Of course, we can question this also, what's the real deep purpose of this. On the other hand, you see there are different names floating around to indicate these kind of developments. So you have digital city, a very early notion in the 80s already, where you just had digital kind of cities similar to what later on came in Second Life. One of the example was digital Amsterdam in the 80s, but it had no correspondence to the real physical city. Another term being used, especially in Korea, for example, is ubiquitous city or U-city. They're having these plans to create 22 ubiquitous cities. 8 of them will be created new, and the others will be upgraded from the existing status. The term smart city, currently more commonplace in general, but is often referring to just offering smart services, e-government, or being used in the context of ICT research. Another connotation we introduce is the term hybrid city, where we want to place equal significance of the real and virtual parts and the comprehensive integration. So here you can see some of the dimensions you have to look at. Of course, we have the virtual city, real city dimension, but then individual activities, groups and social activities, local context and global context you have to deal with. On the other hand, in terms of the smart infrastructure, and here we're coming to the issue of ambient intelligence, which I can only briefly touch on. So the idea is to have a pervasive and ubiquitous communication infrastructure, similar to what Khaldun was describing, with a lot of embedded systems, sensors, actuators, interactive media embedded into the physical environment and being available to the citizens of the city. Now, if you think of this even at a larger scale, similar to these Internet of Things or Internet of Objects, we are really having a shift from just having individual embedded sensors and actuators towards a computing, communication, and interaction substrate that can be handled directly at the application level. So imagine like what you have seen and what I will show you later, also like an interactive table or interactive wall. These are currently realized by having like projections, front projections, top-down projections, or you have an interactive touch sensitive surface. In the future, you will go to the department store and just order, similar like a tablecloth, you will order 2 by 3 meters interactive tablecloth and just put it on a real physical table, and it will have all the characteristics you're looking at. Or you will be buying smart wallpaper. So in a way, when you think of this at a continuous extension, you will have like a smart ecosystem which exists first in parallel and then later on integrated with the existing ecosystems we are existing in. So these are more the technology issues. But on the other hand, similar to what Khaldun said about the citizen-centric cities or approach, what are the guiding value systems? What kind of city do we like to have? A technology-driven and dominated one like this one? Probably not. So we have to develop another kind of guideline, a philosophy, and we call this a humane city. So of course you have the technology implications, and the term humane city has been used in other contexts, but I think it's important that even now in an ICT context, we're talking about a humane city, a city where people can enjoy everyday life and work, have multiple opportunities to exploit their human potential, and lead a creative life with a high quality of services. Of course, what are the models for adapting these concepts which we had? One could go back, for example, to the Greek agora as one model, although not everything was so good at that time too. But in general, I think we have to look for a less technology-driven but more human-oriented approach and vision for future cities. And it should be part of a more comprehensive model having and creating a creative and inclusive society. I can talk more about it. We did an EU-funded project on this called Project Interlink, but I don't have the time to go into the details here. Just to mention 7 claims. One is the more the computer disappears and becomes invisible, the more it determines our lives. This seems at a first-hand kind of paradox, but if you think about it, it will be more obvious to you. The other thing, and this is bad news for all the mobile phone producers, it's all there in the environment. No need to carry any devices. The city is the interface. So basically, you just go there, everything is already there. Similar like, who of you who is traveling is thinking of taking his TV set with him? If you go to a hotel, you expect there is a TV set, there's a phone, etc., there's flowing water and electricity. So it's all there, right? Why should this not be the same with these kind of infrastructures we're talking about? And these kind of people-friendly environments, the computer as we know it, like laptops or desktop PCs, have no role anymore. Also, you have to think about a change from information design to experience design. This requires new affordances, and also privacy is a very important issue. The whole thing is that we have to keep the human in the loop and to talk about interdisciplinary approach and team. And I was so lucky not only being kind of interdisciplinary myself by having a PhD in physics and another one in psychology, but also having teams where you have all these qualifications and backgrounds realized. One important thing when we design these smart environments is that it should not be a system-oriented opportunist smartness, like the smart refrigerator models and things like that. But we should have a people-oriented, empowering smartness where the human is in the loop, and we can make more mature, informed actions based on the suggestions and recommendations. And this is what I call smart spaces make people smarter. Then there's the issue, of course, about privacy, because the more data you need to be collected about the people and the environment in order to provide these kind of smart services, the more also you're losing the control over this. And so I think we have to look very carefully about privacy. It used to be a legal and moral right or a socially negotiated feature, and it's becoming more and more a commodity you pay for and trade, and thus it becomes a privilege. And just remember the time when you could do private calls in a public space, like this telephone booth, which I took a picture in Nice at the Côte d'Azur. This is another telephone booth in Seoul in Korea. It was empty, but I would recommend to the Korean telecom not to destruct it, but maybe there's another use. Talk in private for 25 cents. So you're not disturbing anybody else, and you're also having your privacy. Other people are not overhearing your mobile phone conversation. But jokes aside, but there is some truth to it, but I don't have the time to discuss it. So what we're looking at is to go from rooms via buildings to cities. And we developed at GMD at that time in Darmstadt. GMD was the equivalent to INRIA. Later on, we merged with Fraunhofer for the roomware components for so-called cooperative buildings. So this was a vision scribble of what we called Island in 1997. And then we built these environments. We called them roomware, actually a term I trademarked. And so similar to hardware and software. And so we built interactive tables, interactive chairs and walls, so already at that time. And of course, with the appropriate software to operate on it. On the other hand, there is a kind of interesting initiative we were engaging in. It's called the Disappearing Computer Initiative, which was funded by FET Open, by the European Commission. I was the chair of the steering group, and there were a lot of interesting projects, 17 altogether. And there, if you want to look at, there's a comprehensive book on it, The Disappearing Computer, in LNCS Springer. And so just one example, a project we did, also together with a French partner, EDF, Électricité de France. They had a kind of laboratory for the design of cognition, LDC, and we worked together with them on this project. And the idea was to look at lounge areas, public spaces in office buildings, etc., and enhance them with information technology. One of the many scenarios was to provide notification and awareness about remote teams. And so we had a connection between Fraunhofer IPSI in Darmstadt and EDF in Paris. And one component was what we called the Hello Wall, an ambient display using light patterns to communicate information. And so you would have, I will not explain the meaning of all the patterns, this would take too long. But so you could communicate, there's no sound on this one. You had public patterns everybody would know, but you could also communicate private patterns. Then also we addressed the issue of privacy. We developed a component called Personal Aura, where you had the ability to take on different identities. And what we wanted to do is that you had to have a physical action where you put your ID stick into a broadcasting module, because people don't trust software just to press a button or something like this. So they wanted to have a physical action. And then you had different kind of patterns according to your different identities, which could be communicated. Finally, I would like to give you an example which is coming from games. But on the other hand, I think it's a very good application for hybrid cities. This was done by a good colleague and friend of mine, Adrian Cheok, at the National University in Singapore, and also he has a professorship at Keio University in Japan. And he took the very well-known Pac-Man game and put it into the streets, and there's a video with sound.
Various sensors which we have, which is sensing my body's position and as well as the head orientation. So we know exactly where I am and what I'm looking at. So when we do this, we can then augment the real world which I am in now with the virtual world. So this Pac-Man world, I'm seeing it as part of the real world. I can see cookies in front of me and I'm walking through them as if I'm the human Pac-Man. So what we're aiming for is that we're taking the human Pac-Man and bringing it into more mobile devices. Within 2 years, we'll be able to see full commercial human Pac-Man type games on the mobile phones.
So, of course, this has a funny component, but it shows you what you can do, and of course the equipment will be much smaller, much more appropriate to be carried on, not with these huge backpacks. But the idea to integrate these virtual and real worlds into a hybrid world in a city environment was very interesting. So the last 3 slides are addressing some of the work we did in this EU-funded project Interlink, which I was chairing a working group towards a humane city, designing future urban interaction communication environments. And so we came up with a research agenda which will be also reflected in the calls for Framework 8. And so there are a number of very interesting research lines, just to pick out maybe 2. One is hybrid symmetric interaction, which I think is very important, that you have real symmetry between things in the real world are influencing the virtual world and vice versa. One way is pretty easy, but the other way around, like if you have a floor plan and you're rearranging chairs and tables on the computer screen, can you do the equivalent also then in the real world, right? Or another, R6, spatial and embodied smartness, is looking at the idea that you could use and consider smart spaces as distributed cognitive systems, and looking at them from an outside-in robot aspect, so that the robot maneuvering within a smart space doesn't have to collect all the orientation data, but the smart space knows about itself and can communicate this to the robot in this. And then another very important issue, like the scaling issue, and here I'm talking not only about the number of sensors and nodes and networks, but also about where does one smart space end and where does another smart space start. when you have a private space and then you're reaching out into the public space, who is owning which infrastructure, who is owning which data, etc. So we want to have the city as an urban network for humans, the human in the loop, developing a creative society with individual and collective intelligence, and having sustainability, a smart ecosystem, and an interaction substrate. And this is the end of my talk. Unfortunately, I didn't have too much time, but I think I gave you an overview. Merci beaucoup.